He loved to read so much that he read all of the books in the library in his town. So one day, he went to a bookstore and asked if they had a book that he haven't read yet. An old that worked there said yes and handed the boy a strange, covered in dust book titled Death. He said to the boy, "Here is the book that you've probably never heard of. I can sell it to you for $10 if you promise me to never, ever open it at the last page." The boy agreed and bought the book. He read it and liked it very much, but as promised, he didn't open it at the last page. One day he could bear it no longer and checked the last page. Suggested retail price, $5. A young cowboy walks into the saloon in a rough and dusty western town in Texas. He sits at the counter and notices an old cowboy with his arms folded, staring blankly at a full bowl of chowder. After 15 minutes of just sitting there staring at it, the young cowboy bravely asked the old cowboy, "If you ain't gonna eat that, do you mind if I do?" The older cowboy slowly turns his head toward the young wrangler and in his best cowboy manner says, "Nah, go ahead." Eagerly, the young cowboy reaches over and slides the bowl over to his place and starts spooning in it with delight. He gets nearly down to the bottom and notices a dead mouse. The sight was shocking, and he immediately barfs up the chowder back into the bowl. The old cowboy quietly says, "Yep, that's as far as I got, too." A cowboy rode into a dusty old town and stopped at the saloon for a dinner. Unfortunately, the locals had a habit of picking on strangers. When he finished his dinner, he found his horse had been stolen. He went back into the restaurant, and with a quick move of his hands, he flipped his guns into the air, caught them above his head without even looking, and fired at the ceiling. "Which one of you cowardly sidewinders stole my hoss?" he yelled. No one answered. "All right, I'm gonna have another beer. And if my hoss ain't back outside by the time I finish, I'm gonna have to do what I done in Texas. And I don't like to have to do what I done in Texas." Some of the locals shifted restlessly. He had another beer, walked outside, and his horse was back. As he swung up into the saddle and started to ride out of town, the waiter ran out of the saloon and asked, "Say, partner, before you go, what happened in Texas?" The cowboy turned back and said, "I walked home." One day, little Johnny went to his father and asked him if he could buy him a $200 bicycle for his birthday. Johnny's father said, "Johnny, we have a $80,000 mortgage on the house, and you want me to buy you a bicycle? Wait until Christmas." Christmas came around, and Johnny asked again. The father said, "Well, the mortgage is still extremely high. Sorry about that. Ask me again some other time." Well, about 2 days later, the boy was seen walking out of the house with all his belongings in a suitcase. The father felt sorry for him and asked him why he was leaving. The boy said, "Yesterday I was walking past your room, and I heard you say that you were pulling out, and Mommy said that you should wait, because she was coming too. And damned if I'll get stuck with an $80,000 mortgage." A blonde walks up to a Coke machine and puts in a coin. Out pops a Coke. The blonde looks amazed and runs away to get some more coins. She returns and starts feeding the machine madly, and of course the machine keeps feeding out drinks. Another person walks up behind the blonde and watches her antics for a few minutes before stopping her and asking if someone else could have a go. The blonde turns around and shouts, "Can't you see I'm winning?" A man is driving down an old dirt road. As he is driving, he notices there are very few houses nearby. As he is enjoying the scenery, he runs his car over into the ditch. As it had recently rained, the ditch was slick and muddy, and he had found himself stuck. He realizes his predicament, so he starts walking. He walks up to a house and sees a farmer plowing his field while his wife is dropping in seeds, and his kid is burying the seeds. The man asks the farmer, "Hey, you got a phone? My car is stuck in the ditch." The farmer says, "I'll unhitch my horse and pull you out." The man says, "No, I need a phone to call a wrecker. My car is stuck in the ditch." But the farmer insists on using his one horse. So the man and the farmer walk back to the car. As they approach the car, the farmer says, "I'll hook him to the bumper and you put it in neutral." The man says, "Okay." So he gets in his car and puts it into neutral. The farmer gets behind the horse and says, "Come on, Dusty. Come on, Matt. Come on, Richard." Then the farmer says, "Come on, Elmer." Then the horse, with ease, pulls the car out of the ditch. In shock, the man asks the farmer why he called the horse so many names. The farmer says, "Well, Elmer is blind, and if he thinks he's working by himself, he won't pull." A woman goes into Harrods to buy a rod and reel for her grandson's birthday. She doesn't know which one to get, so she just grabs one and goes over to the counter. The Harrods salesman is standing there, wearing dark sunglasses. She says, "Excuse me, can you tell me anything about this rod and reel?" He says, "Madam, I'm completely blind. But if you'll drop it on the counter, I can tell you everything you need to know about it from the sound it makes." She doesn't believe him, but drops it on the counter anyway. He says, "That's a 6-foot Shakespeare graphite rod with a Zebco 404 reel and 10 lb. Test line. It's a good all-around combination, and it's on sale this week for $44." She says, "It's amazing that you can tell all that just by the sound of it dropping on the counter. I'll take it." As she opens her purse, her credit card drops on the floor. "Oh, that sounds like a Visa card," he says. As the lady bends down to pick up the card, she accidentally breaks wind. At first, she is really embarrassed, but then realizes there is no way the blind salesman could tell it was she who had farted. The man rings up the sale and says, "That'll be $58.50, please." The woman is totally confused by this and asks, "Didn't you tell me it was on sale for $44? How did you get to $58.50? He replies, "Yes, madam, the rod and reel are 44 cents, but the duck caller is $11 and the fish bait is £3.50. 7. Cha-chich. The local news station was interviewing an 80-year-old lady because she had just gotten married for the 4th time. The interviewer asked her questions about her life, about what it felt like to be marrying again at 80, and then about her new husband's occupation. "He's a funeral director," she answered. Interesting, the newsman thought. He then asked her if she wouldn't mind telling him a little about her first 3 husbands and what they did for a living. She paused for a few moments, needing time to reflect on all those years. After a short time, a smile came to her face and she answered proudly, explaining that she had first married a banker when she was in her 20s, then a circus ringmaster when in her 40s, and a preacher when in her 60s, and now, in her 80s, a funeral director. The interviewer looked at her, quite astonished, and asked why she had married 4 men with such diverse careers. She smiled and explained, "I married 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go." A little old lady wanted to join a biker club. She knocked on the door of a local biker club, and a big, hairy, bearded biker with tattoos all over his arms answered the door. She proclaimed, "I want to join your biker club." The guy was amused and told her that she needed to meet certain biker requirements before she would be allowed to join. So the biker asks her, "You have a bike?" The little old lady says, "Yay, that's my Harley over there," and points to a Harley parked in the driveway. The biker asks her, "Do you smoke?" The little old lady says, "Yay, I smoke. I smoke 4 packs of cigarettes a day and a couple of cigars while I'm shooting pool." The biker was impressed and asks, "Well, have you ever been picked up by the fuzz?" The little old lady says, "No, I've never been picked up by the fuzz, but I've been swung around by my a few times." An elderly gentleman had serious hearing problems for a number of years. He went to the doctor, and the doctor was able to have him fitted for a set of hearing aids that allowed the gentleman to hear 100%. The elderly gentleman went back in a month to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Your hearing is perfect. Your family must be really pleased that you can hear again." The gentleman replied, "Oh, I haven't told my family yet. I just sit around and listen to the conversations. I've changed my will 3 times." Early one morning, a mother went in to wake up her son. "Wake up, son. It's time to go to school." "But why, Mom? I don't want to go." "Give me 2 reasons why you don't want to go." "Well, the kids hate me for one, and the teachers hate me too." "Oh, that's no reason not to go to school. Come on now and get ready." "Give me 2 reasons why I should go to school." "Well, for one, you're 52 years old. And for another, you're the principal." 85-year-old George went for his annual physical. All of his tests came back with normal results. Dr. Smith said, "George, everything looks great physically. How are you doing mentally and emotionally? Are you at peace with yourself? And do you have a good relationship with God?" George replied, "God and me are tight. He knows I have poor eyesight, so he's fixed it so that when I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, poof, the light goes on when I'm done. Poof, the light goes off." "Wow," commented Dr. Smith. "That's incredible." A little later in the day, Dr. Smith called George's wife. "Ethel," he said, "George is doing fine. Physically, he's great. But I had to call because I'm in awe of his relationship with God. Is it true that he gets up during the night and poof, the light goes on in the bathroom, and then when he is through, poof, the light goes off?" Ethel exclaimed. "Oh my God, he's peeing in the refrigerator again." When Mozart passed away, he was buried in a churchyard. A couple days later, the town drunk was walking through the cemetery and heard some strange noise coming from the area where Mozart was buried. Terrified, the drunk ran and got the priest to come and listen to it. The priest bent close to the grave and heard some faint, unrecognizable music coming from the grave. Frightened, the priest ran and got the town magistrate. When the magistrate arrived, he bent his ear to the grave, listened for a moment, and said, "Ah, yes, that's Mozart's 9th Symphony being played backwards." He listened a while longer and said, "There's the 8th Symphony, and it's backwards too. Most puzzling." So the magistrate kept listening. "There's the 7th, the 6th, the 5th. Suddenly, the realization of what was happening dawned on the magistrate. He stood up and announced to the crowd that had gathered in the cemetery, "My fellow citizens, there's nothing to worry about. It's just Mozart decomposing." A 17-year-old boy who works part-time at Pizza Hut pulls up to his house in a stunning Porsche. His parents are immediately suspicious, knowing there's no way his after-school job could have paid for such an expensive car. "Where did you get that car?" they shout, astonished. "I bought it today," the boy replies calmly. "With what money?" his mom demands. "We know how much a Porsche costs, and there's no way you can afford it." The boy shrugs. "It's used, and I got a great deal. I only paid $20 for it." His parents are even more shocked. "Who would sell a Porsche for 20? "The woman up the street," the boy explains. "She just moved in. I delivered a pizza to her and she offered to sell me the Porsche for $20. Baffled, his parents rush to the neighbor's house, ready for an explanation. They find her calmly planting flowers in her yard. "I'm the father of the boy you sold a Porsche to for $20, the dad says. "We need to know why you sold it so cheap." The woman, without looking up, responds, "I got a call from my husband this morning. I thought he was on a business trip in Florida, but it turns out he ran off to Hawaii with his secretary and doesn't plan on coming back." The boy's mom, still confused, asks, "But what does that have to do with selling our son a Porsche for $20? With a satisfied smile, the woman replies, "My husband told me to sell his new Porsche and send him the money, so I did." Mary and Jane are old friends. They have both been married to their husbands for a long time. Mary is upset because she thinks her husband doesn't find her attractive anymore. "As I get older, he doesn't bother to look at me," Mary cries. "I'm so sorry for you. As I get older, my husband says I get more beautiful every day," replies Jane. "Yes, but your husband's an antique dealer." A passenger was in the back of a taxi when he leaned forward and tapped the driver on the shoulder. Suddenly, the driver screamed loudly, lost control of the car, swerved onto the footpath, and stopped just inches away from a shop window. Everything went quiet in the car as both the driver and passenger sat in shock. "Are you okay?" the driver finally asked. "Sorry about that, but you scared the living daylights out of me." The passenger apologized to the driver. "I didn't know just a little tap on the shoulder would startle someone so much." No, it's my fault," the driver replied. "Today is my first day as a taxi driver. I've been driving a hearse for 25 years. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are on a camping trip. After a hearty meal and a good bottle of wine, they lay down to sleep. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, Holmes wakes his trusted companion and asks, "Watson, what do you see?" Rubbing his sleepy eyes, Watson answers, "I see millions and millions of stars." "Correct, Watson. And what do you conclude from that?" Watson thinks for a moment and then answers, "Well, temporally I conclude it is about 03:30 a.m. Astrologically, I conclude that Venus is showing in the sign of Aquarius, Astronomically, I conclude that we are on a planet, orbiting the sun in a spiral arm of our galaxy. And religiously, I conclude that God wants to show us with this splendor that we are but a small, insignificant speck of dust in the infinite grace of His creation. Why, Holmes? What do you mean? Watson, somebody stole our tent. Sitting on the side of the highway, waiting to catch speeding drivers, a state police officer sees a car puttering along at 22 mph. He thinks to himself, "This driver is just as dangerous as a speeder." So he turns on his lights and pulls the driver over. Approaching the car, he notices that there are 5 old ladies, 2 in the front seat and 3 in the back, eyes wide and white as ghosts. The driver, obviously confused, says to him, "Officer, I don't understand. I was doing exactly the speed limit. What seems to be the problem?" "Ma'am," the officer replies, "you weren't speeding, but you should know that driving slower than the speed limit can also be a danger to other drivers." "Slower than the speed limit?" "No, sir. I was doing the speed limit exactly." 22 miles an hour, the old woman says, a bit proudly. The state police officer, trying to contain a chuckle, explains to her that 22 was the route number, not the speed limit. A bit embarrassed, the woman grinned and thanked the officer for pointing out her error. "But before I let you go, ma'am, I have to ask, is everyone in this car okay?" "These women seem awfully shaken, and they haven't muttered a single peep this whole time," the officer asks. "Oh, they'll be fine in a minute or two, officer. We just got off Route 119. A woman was in bed with her lover when she heard her husband opening the front door. "Hurry," she said. "Stand in the corner." She quickly rubbed baby oil all over him, and then she dusted him with talcum powder. "Don't move until I tell you to," she whispered. "Just pretend you're a statue." "What's this, honey?" the husband inquired as he entered the room. "Oh, it's just a statue," she replied nonchalantly. "The Smiths bought one for their bedroom. I liked it so much, I got one for us too." No more was said about the statue, not even later that night when they went to sleep. Around 2 in the morning, the husband got out of bed, went to the kitchen, and returned a while later with a sandwich and a glass of milk. "Here," he said to the statue, "eat something." I stood like an idiot at the Smiths for 3 days, and nobody offered me as much as a glass of water. You've all heard of the Air Force's ultra-high security super secret base in Nevada, known simply as Area 51? Well, late one afternoon, the Air Force folks out at Area 51 were very surprised to see a Cessna landing at their secret base. They immediately impounded the aircraft and hauled the pilot into an interrogation room. The pilot's story was that he took off from Vegas, got lost, and spotted the base just as he was about to run out of fuel. The Air Force started a full FBI background check on the pilot and held him overnight during the investigation. By the next day, they were finally convinced that the pilot really was lost and wasn't a spy. They gassed up his airplane, gave him a terrifying "you did not see a base" briefing, complete with threats of spending the rest of his life in prison, told him Vegas was that away on such and such a heading, and sent him on his way. The day after that, though, to the total disbelief of the Air Force, the same Cessna showed up again. Once again, the MPs surrounded the plane. Only this time, there were two people in the plane. The same pilot jumped out and said, "Do anything you want to me, but my wife is in the plane and you have to tell her where I was last night."